why does it deserve a remake? Furthermore, why does Resident Evil 4 deserve the title of being one of the greatest games of all time? It was anything but smooth sailing from the moment of this game's conception, and even its legacy is mired in slight controversy as revealed to the world in a lawsuit from 2021. I remember sitting on the couch with my brother after school, curtains drawn, following the game's protagonist Leon through darkened woods and dirty villages. Alright, pretty boy, let's see what you've got, I thought, as I watched him swish his perfect hair back and forth as he blasted through zombie after zombie, avoiding chainsaws and mutated abominations along the way. As I continued watching the story, I found myself both terrified, because I hate horror movies, and engrossed because the story was that engaging. It was an interactive cinematic experience that pulled me into the video game world of Resident Evil. Today, I'd like to walk you through the game's development, its strengths and flaws, as well as legacy that make it worthy of a remake despite its struggles. Problems started early on with RE4, and the game took a while to develop. At least 4 early versions of the game were made and later scrapped. Leon would infiltrate Umbrella's main headquarters in Europe, featuring classic monsters. Along the way, Leon would also gain a mysterious power from the progenitor virus. No Ashley was present in this version, rather some other unnamed girl. Unlike the final version, some first-person elements were to be included. Set in a haunted building, Leon contracted a disease and fought paranormal enemies, such as suits of armor, living dolls, and a ghost-like man with a large hook. The entire color palette was switched to a bluish tint, and Leon would suffer from hallucinations and flashbacks, lending the game a much more dreamlike atmosphere. The hallucination version continued with this theme, though it pushed limits to be even scarier. Leon infiltrates Spencer's castle looking for the truth, while inside a laboratory, a girl wakes up. And then what? This plotline was abandoned before a script could even be completed, but there is one more detail I could find. Leon would have some kind of zombie dog that would accompany him as he progressed through the castle. Given Ari's track record with zombie dogs, this would have been quite the change of pace. This version was scrapped, however, because of budget concerns. The 4th early version was cancelled before it was ever even shown to the public, but it did contain classic zombies. It was deemed too generic and formulaic, and after all these early failures, Capcom decided to free itself from creative bankruptcy by going in a completely different direction. What wound up being the final version of the game was the result of the development team shifting the gameplay system, camera system, and focus away from the Umbrella Company and onto Leon. Just last year, there was a lawsuit made against Capcom for copyright infringement. Capcom allegedly used Jurachek's artwork without permission for textures in RE4. Cracked glass texture was added to the logo, and detail on a doorframe that she took in a private mansion showed up on the doorframe of a door in-game. Further evidence was presented from Capcom's hacked files from 2020 that showed the same exact file name for images as Jurachek's CD. Jurachek claimed that 80 plus of her photos appear in the RE games over 200 times. What does it say about such a large corporation to cut corners and take advantage of smaller artists? Jurachek was originally asking $12 million in damages and anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000 for each photo used. This dispute was eventually resolved when a dismissal was filed in February of this year, but I could find no details as to how much she settled for. What do you think? Was this coincidental? Getting rid of zombies seems like a risky choice for a game franchise built on this tried-and-true trope. But it panned out. It scared the pants off of players, wowed them with its graphics, and changed the survival horror genre forever. Capcom saw this response and decided to give the people what they wanted, which was more RE4. The game was in fact so good that a game that was a GameCube exclusive received a PS2 version by the end of 2005. What did Capcom do with all that goodwill? Fumbled it. While there were additional gameplay features, unfortunately, they also downgraded the audio and visuals. There were no shadow or lighting effects, and the models were of lower resolution. A PC port was released in March of 2007. This version was criticized for its poor visuals and awkward controls. When the Wii version launched later that year, either May, June, or July, depending on region, it was praised for its integration of motion controls. Capcom decided to stretch their reach even further by getting into the pockets of even more players worldwide, this time by going mobile. RE4 for mobile launched in 2009. It was a copy of the main game from sounds to storyline. It was actually pretty impressive to get it working on a phone. Let's take a look at what made RE4 so different and ultimately so successful. RE4 was the point where Capcom decided to switch from a fixed camera to a dynamic camera system. Gone were the days when walking through a doorway would cause you to walk immediately into a wall. Now you had a full view of Leon's glorious hair and any zombie making its way directly towards you. The atmosphere was breathtaking, in the sense that I held my breath nearly every moment I heard the sound of a chainsaw in the distance. Rounding a corner to see a village teeming with infected villagers had me inhaling very deeply as my brother maneuvered across it. Leon and Ada both inject the game with a cool factor that had me wishing I could one day grow up to pull off a leather jacket or dress with as much swagger as they do. It helps that both characters have a previous history from the other games, and that Ada tends to hold her cards close to her chest. Part of making a successful game is making the process of playing it enjoyable, and RE4 excelled on this front. The main story is fun. You get to utilize several handguns, shotguns, rifles, magnums, as well as other special weapons like the Chicago typewriter and the iconic rocket launcher. It also featured extra game modes such as the shooting range, separate ways, mercenaries, assignment Ada, and bottle cap. Mercenaries is one of those RE classics that you can spend hours grinding, alone or with a buddy, as you unlock new outfits. Probably one of the most iconic parts of any RE game are the enemies. While some games go off the deep end with transformations, looking at you RE6, RE4 managed to deliver 11 bosses, and while some fights were a little repetitive, there were more than a couple that were genuinely harrowing given the confined space. So what other aspects of the game just didn't pan out? Namely, the mother of all escort missions. Dealing with Ashley was almost enough for me to bail on the game. She was so whiny. The damsel in distress motif is pretty boring and has been cycled out of games and movies for a reason. Parts of the castle could drag and just weren't as fun or exciting as other areas. There's also the issue of the game's shooting mechanic. Leon has to stand completely still while shooting, as if your legs are casting concrete as soon as you take aim. This was changed in RE6, but I still question why 4 and 5 didn't adapt to this format that, logically, makes way more sense. Not everyone loved how many QuickTime events were in the game either. You could make it through a gauntlet of zombies, just to die at the very end to a QuickTime event and have to start completely over. Mashing buttons likely contributed to carpal tunnel for a lot of youths, as this game would have you mash buttons like your life depended on it. Because it did. Despite this, many people look back on the game fondly, and this game definitely made its mark in the industry. Remember when I talked about the 4 earlier versions of the game that were scrapped? Well, one of those versions, directed by this guy, was about an invincible man with extraordinary skill and intellect. The team decided that this character didn't quite fit in with the RE aesthetic, so it morphed into another extremely successful Capcom franchise, Devil May Cry. That series has made its own headlines, selling over 27 million copies worldwide and becoming the gold standard for stylized action and hack and slash gameplay. With some of the other scrapped ideas from early development, Capcom recycled them into newer RE titles. The progenitor virus was used in RE5, and the Spencer estate was part of the DLC for the same game. There's a lot of debate about whether RE4 belongs under the survival horror or action horror branch. While RE5 and 6 could definitely be labeled action horror, RE4 adopted more action elements without giving up the horror elements that stayed with players days after finishing a level. There was so much tension as you made your way through forest, village, and castle. A horde of zombies around every corner, keenly aware of just how little ammo you had. If you were ready to take the scares to a whole new dimension, you could try RE4 in VR. This game transferred over to VR with only a few hiccups, and allowed you to get up close and personal with the game's many iconic enemies and locations. Puzzles, given their interactive nature, were a lot more fun in this medium, but Capcom had less options when it came to cutscenes. Enter the Void, a completely black volume with the screen of the cutscene playing just a few feet in front of you. Given that Capcom now has 2 remakes under its belt, with RE2 and RE3, and saw a lot of success with RE8 Village, they should have intimate knowledge of how to get the ambience just right. The full story has not been revealed just yet, and it's unknown whether Capcom will decide to add, remove, or change the order of events in the story to get a fresh take. How about the characters? How do they compare so far? We've seen Ashley, brief glimpses of Dr. Salvador, otherwise known as Chainsaw Man, Ramon Salazar, Osmond Sadler, and Ada. The newer game brings updated graphics, of course, but as we've seen before, no AAA title is too big to fail. A game will need to connect with audiences at the same level as the original, neither adhering too strictly to outdated game mechanics, nor scrapping the key elements that define the genre. It's a tightrope that Capcom must walk, but their track record so far has been solid. So, that's basically the story of RE4's development. It hit more than a few rough patches on the path to becoming one of the greatest games of all time, but no one can deny the effort the developers put into it. I, for one, am really looking forward to the remake next year, as well as further installments in the RE franchise as a whole. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And if not, thanks for watching anyway. Let me know if you have a movie or topic you would like me to discuss. Pero here, wishing you sweet dreams until next time.